Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and give a nice warm LinkedIn welcome for your host of today's speaker series, Pablo Chavez.
Thank you, Voice of God, and thanks everybody for joining us today for this installment of the LinkedIn Speaker Series. I'm tremendously excited about this, and I'm looking forward to telling you about it, about why. I'm Pablo Chavez. I lead LinkedIn's public policy team. I'm also responsible for our economic graph team, and it's a real tremendous honor to welcome Zoe Baird to the stage today. She'll be joined by Alan Blue in a couple of minutes. But before we get started, and before we get to that, let me talk a little bit about the LinkedIn Speaker Series and give you a little bit of background about it. The mission of the series is about bringing inspiring ideas and innovative speakers to LinkedIn, both for our employees and also for our members, with the ultimate goal of helping everybody advance in their careers and become more successful and productive. So the more important thing maybe to point out is that you can actually get more engaged with the speaker series by going to speakers.linkedin.com. And also, I just found this out last night as I was listening to the podcast. There's a podcast, and you can check that out also on the iTunes store. So Zoe Baird. Zoe Baird is the head of the Markle Foundation, which is, and these are my words, it's essentially kind of like this think tank, action tank, convener of tremendous talent all around the idea of developing policy solutions for the most difficult challenges that the United States faces on the policy front. And so, for example, the Markle Foundation has been instrumental in addressing healthcare reform. It's also been very, very deeply involved in national security issues. And currently, the focus of the Markle Foundation is to bring innovative policy solutions to workforce development. And that leads to the connection to LinkedIn. Markle is responsible for a program called Rework America and a specific initiative called Skillful. And this is a partnership that they started and that LinkedIn has plugged into in both Denver in the state of Colorado and Phoenix in the state of Arizona. And the whole idea, in large part, is to connect middle skills workers to economic opportunity through training and work resources as well. So it's been really, really exciting. And I'll say that it's no surprise that this is led by Zoe, who hands down is one of today's leading policy voices in the United States. She's one of the most effective, influential, and one of the smartest voices in the policy space in the United States. And so it really is an incredible honor to have her here. Just to give you guys a sense of the types of things that Zoe gets involved in, so recently the Department of Commerce, they started an advisory board, a private sector advisory board, that's all about developing public policies, smart policies around the digital economy and making sure that the digital economy works for everybody. And Zoe was appointed co-chair of that by the Secretary of Commerce, which is a tremendous honor, but it also demonstrates kind of the level that she plays at. I should note, too, that Zoe is a Berkeley grad, so this is a little bit of a homecoming for her, and it's great to have her here. I see some quiet shout-outs in silence. Go Bears, says the Stanford grad. So Zoe's going to be joined on stage by Alan Blue. And now, for those of us at LinkedIn, Alan is the classic person who needs no introduction. For those of you who don't know Alan, Alan is a co-founder of LinkedIn. He's been with the company since the beginning, since actually before the beginning. And it's a great privilege for me to invite him also to the stage, simply because I've had the opportunity to work closely with Alan over the last couple of years, and I've had a chance to witness his thought leadership and action leadership around the Skillful partnership. It's been a joy to watch and a real learning experience for me. I'll note, too, that Alan is deeply involved in helping the company accomplish its overall vision of creating economic opportunity for the global workforce through product development and other initiatives as well. And I guess I'll just say that together, Zoe and Alan on the stage, I mean, what you guys are witnessing is maybe two of the top, 12 or so policy leaders in the United States around the intersection of innovation and workforce development. So it really is a tremendous honor. Speaking of honor, there is one more thing that I'd like to do before introducing, before bringing Zoe and Alan to the stage. There's some folks here from both Markle and from LinkedIn who are working on Skillful. Could I just ask you guys to stand up for 1 second, just for, I'm looking at you, Allison, come on. So I want to do this for 2 reasons. First, for the other folks in the room, this gives you an opportunity to kind of identify individuals who are working on the Skillful initiative so that you can ask them questions and figure out how to get more involved after this. So the folks who are standing up are partners and participants in this effort. The second thing is I just really wanted to ask you guys to join me in congratulating them for the tremendous work they've done so far. Both the Markle team and the LinkedIn team have come together in this effort. And over the last year plus, they've done tremendous work on the ground. I'll tell you from personal experience from watching this that it is not easy work, but it is tremendously important and gratifying work, hopefully, to the whole team. And so if you guys could please join me in congratulating them for the work they've done so far. Thank you, guys. You guys have been awesome. So with that, I would like to bring Zoe Baird and Alan Blue to the stage. One commercial interruption before you guys get started. So this is a public event, and we would encourage you guys to share what you've learned here, what you're hearing here through LinkedIn and other social channels. The hashtag is InSpeaker, hashtag InSpeaker, INSPEAKER, all one word. And then, okay, I have memorized this. So Zoe's Twitter handle is Zoe Baird Markle, all one word, and Alan is shorter, Alan B, ALLEN-B, all one word. So thanks, everybody.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming. And I'm going to put in a really quick plug here for those of you who are online, but would like to get a copy of Markle's book free. Everybody who's here in 2025 will find on their seat a little USB-driven version of America's Moment, which is the book that Markle published last year. And it's worth coming over. So if you want to come find us in person and get a book, please do it. Otherwise, welcome online. Welcome, Zoe.
Thank you.
I wanted to start out by talking about politics. Last night, we had the second day of the Democratic National Convention, and last week we had the Republican National Convention. What do you think?
I didn't think people in California noticed.
What's your impression? I've actually been, I have found the two conventions to be very different from each other. And I'm curious, sort of like from your perspective, which is clearly an insider perspective, how are you looking at them? I mean, and how are people in the rest of the country reacting?
Well, you know, I think what we're working on together is probably the undercurrent of these conventions and of the driving social force at the moment, that whether it's whatever the issue is, whether the issue is globalization, immigration, the economy, the racial issues, whatever the issue is, the issues are driven by disruption, and the disruptions driven by technology and globalization, and that's creating uncertainty. And what we're all working on is trying to help people sort out that uncertainty for their own lives, figure out for themselves personally, for their children, how to make sense of the uncertainty and find a healthy place in that for their future, find constructive paths for their future. And as we do our work together in the context of Skillful, we're really trying to help people find paths with equal dignity for creating a future. It's not just about finding new ways to learn to code or get a job. We're looking at soft skills, constructive ways to learn, ways to relate to each other, how to become part of teams. You know, I'm sure in the work you're doing every day and when you're looking at LinkedIn profiles and how to create networks and what are communities that are forming, through the work you're doing at LinkedIn, you don't think of yourself as just working in a linear way to create, an engineer's profile or the profile of a nurse. You're trying to create new ways of creating community and new structures for people to live their lives in their communities. And I think what we're seeing is that we're going through the transition where the old ways where that happened have broken down, and we need to help people get to the new ways. You're not hearing a lot of that conversation at the conventions. I hope as this week goes on, maybe we'll hear a little more about that. I'd keep your ears open. I have the sense that we will hear more about that.
And so how do you create a sense of positivism, or if that's the right word, a sense of a sort of positive outlook that the future can be brighter than it is right now? Because when you look at, say, Trump's reaction or even Bernie Sanders' reaction, a lot of it has to do kind of with pulling back, which is kind of it's a reaction which is based in concern. It's about the trade policies. It's about immigration, all of which sort of boils down, as you say, to economic opportunity. How do you get people to embrace a solution which is more forward-thinking, one which is more focused on, say, education or learning new skills, an environment where people are pretty scared and they're kind of pulling back?
Well, whether or not I embrace your interpretation, does anybody, when their kids still watch the movie Pollyanna or read the book? No. Okay. Well.
A little bit. Okay.
Okay, I won't use that analogy then. I'll find another. I'm an ultimate optimist. I always think there is a constructive way to tell the tale. So when we set out on this work like 4 years ago, and we said the very essence of our democracy depends on finding a path through this transition for people, we felt that we had to be able to use technology as an enabler, as a way of helping people find new paths, new opportunities, enjoy it along the way, have some fun, see it as constructive, and create a whole multiplicity of ways of figuring out the opportunities and getting the training and skills they needed.
So can you give us a quick overview of what that proposed set of solutions is? Because part of it's on the sort of training and skill side, but America's Moment, which is the book you all have in front of you, actually outlines things sort of more broadly. Actually, let's pause there for a second. What's the problem? You mentioned globalization, you mentioned technology. So before we get to the solution, how has Markle seen the problem that we're facing?
Okay, so we did a pretty deep dive with a pretty broad set of people from different points of view to try to figure out what the problem was. And in sum, we basically concluded that our country and really the globe was going through a transition as fundamental as we had gone through 100 years ago when we moved from an agricultural society to the industrial age. And at that time, we had to create entirely new institutions to equip people to work in this industrial age. People moved from rural areas into cities. They worked in entirely different kinds of environments. They worked in institutions where they were doing routine things over and over and over again, whether they were in factories and automobile plants, whatever. They were living in different kinds of homes. They needed institutional kind of education where everyone was going to learn the same kind of thing. We needed to train people differently. We invented high schools. We'd never had high schools before. So every institution had to be changed. We created all these industrial institutions. We created the government. We didn't have federal government institutions like we created for the industrial age. But now we're going through as profound a transition from the industrial age. We went kind of through the information age, but now we're really in a digital economy where everything's being digitized. It's not just information, it's absolutely everything. So now we're going into this digital economy, and we haven't recreated our institutions. Our federal government looks like it used to. our schools look like it used to. We have high schools, we tell everybody to get a college diploma. 70% of Americans haven't gotten a college diploma for decades. We're still telling them the same thing, and it's not working. We need to remake our institutions. And you know what? We have the capacity to do that in a much more granular way. And that's what technology and digitization gives us. So we're going through the same kind of really rugged transformation right now. We're in that transition that we went through in that period when we moved from the agricultural age to the industrial age, which was a really hard transition. Think of the 30s. That was a really hard transition. But we had smart policymakers and significant leaders. I mean, think Andrew Carnegie, people who really thought ahead, invested significant money, and helped people make the transition. And that's what we need again. And that's what we're trying to do with leaders like Alan and companies like LinkedIn that can think big, look ahead, think what that capacity they have to contribute to help people make this transition.
So we've got a digitization of the economy. We've got basically a whole bunch of institutions which kind of need to be remade. What are the sort of 8, I mentioned 8 because the book mentions 8 specific things. We don't have to go into all of them, but sort of what are the general themes that you identified in terms of the kinds of change which need to occur?
So I'll put them in 2 buckets. One, we've begun to talk about how to help people get the training and the career paths that they need to participate in the new economy and to really develop lifelong learning and constantly change in order to keep up and create new great opportunities for themselves. The other is how to create more good jobs. We've had a declining middle class. We haven't had really effective ambitions for creating many more good paying career paths and great career opportunities. We know that most new jobs are created in small and medium-sized businesses, particularly new small jobs. And so we've been working on trying to create platforms that enable small and medium-sized businesses to grow so they can use data in the same way big companies do to identify markets, to create efficiencies in their operations, to become mini multinationals so that they can serve markets all around the world as the middle class is growing all around the world so that they're able to participate in those markets and create many, many more jobs for people with middle skills so that there'll be many more people who can use LinkedIn in order to find many more jobs.
Right. So, so that's a big component of it. And you guys, and is Markle actually working on those projects yet? Because I know you're working with us on the skill side.
We are. We have helped found a company that's still in the stealth mode that will be a platform for small and medium-sized businesses to serve larger businesses and hopefully grow through having access to more efficient access to serving businesses. And we also are working with some other platforms in other countries, which we hope will become a way for U.S. companies to be marketing into other countries through Made in USA kind of verticals on those platforms.
So how did you choose to do it by founding a company versus non-governmental organizations or through government itself? I mean, what are the ways in which it's sort of I find it really interesting because I think the knee-jerk reaction 20 years ago would be to set up a big charitable organization or something like that in order to be able to drive that forward or try to establish a piece of policy. So why set it up as a separate company?
Well, we really believe in working with every sector. And some of the work that we do is to work across sectors. So in the work we're doing together, we're collaborating with the state of Colorado and LinkedIn and ourselves and nonprofits and workforce centers. And we've got a very broad collaboration of people from different sectors all working together and rowing in the same direction. And that's what it'll take to succeed. In other work that we're doing, the people who are going to hire people are going to be companies. We're not the ones who are going to hire people. And so those companies need to have the incentives to move in the direction that will enable them to grow and hire more people. And so we're trying to be a catalyst for what they might do. In the case of creating a platform, it's a company that's going to have the investment dollars to grow the platform and to create the business that will enable these small and medium-sized businesses to succeed. And so if we can be a catalyst for a great entrepreneur to bring together a bunch of good investors and excellent talent and create a business and help them see the possibility that they might not have thought about otherwise, then that's a great role for us.
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, it reminds me of like a lot of things we do here in the Valley, which have a lot to do with venture capital and with basically getting companies started so they can participate and take advantage of all the economic forces and the market forces which enable companies to get really big. Is that something that nonprofits are doing more and more often, or is this something which is innovation?
I think it's something that is being done in many different ways now. It's, I think you see in the Valley that more and more philanthropists are setting up LLCs to do their philanthropy rather than using a classical nonprofit model. I think you see the IRS opening up the rules that enable foundations to make investments in companies in program-related ways because that allows investors to get a return which enable more capital to go towards social objectives. So I think you see a whole range of forms of social investment being made now that didn't happen in decades past.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense here because we have a very change-oriented mission here at LinkedIn, and I think one of the things which is most attractive about working at a place like LinkedIn is you get a chance to create a big business which also has an impact on the world, and it's intentionally that way from the beginning.
Absolutely. You couldn't create a nonprofit business and put the capital into it you need to invest to have the platform you have at LinkedIn. And we couldn't create Skillful without a partner like LinkedIn. We couldn't do it. And that's why we came to you and asked if you would partner with us. So it really is a necessary part of achieving these public objectives. And there are not a lot of for-profit partners that are prepared to have a larger vision of their role in society, and those who do, I think, will learn from that larger vision in a way that becomes very dynamic within the company.
One of the actually the greatest success stories on this has been Starbucks. So you all worked with Starbucks to create the, well, you should tell us about it, but basically create a mechanism by which the people who work at Starbucks can complete their college educations through ASU essentially as part of their compensation. So how did that work, and what did Starbucks bring to the table? In other words, when you're looking for a company who's making a good partner, what do you look for?
So when we started this work, Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, was the co-chair of Rework America, which is the initial group that we pulled together and developed this book, America's Moment, and developed the initial ideas for the work. And one of the other members was Michael Crow, the president of ASU. And they agreed together to create something called the Starbucks College Achievement Plan, which initially had about 1,000 Starbucks partners, which is what they call their employees, who could get their college, go back and complete their college diploma at ASU online while they were working at Starbucks. That program has really expanded, and they're now, I think now any Starbucks employee can do it, even if they didn't. They moved it down first to people who hadn't met the number of units that you had to have at first, and now I think it's any Starbucks employee. So it's really expanded. It's been really successful. They're really ambitious about it. And the notion is, you know, this lifelong learning notion that even if you hadn't been able to complete college, and I was at the Starbucks annual meeting when they announced this, and it was so moving to see people in the audience, Starbucks partners, who were just in tears that they had to drop out of school to go to work at Starbucks as a barista because they couldn't afford to go to college anymore. And here they were able to keep going to school while they were working to support their family. Either they'd gotten pregnant, or somebody in their family gotten sick, or they just couldn't afford to go to school anymore. And it was really very rewarding to see that. And we have just a lot of examples out of this group, and then it's evolved into a bigger group, and Jeff has since joined as one of the members, and it's in a somewhat different form now. I won't go into the evolution of this group 4 years later, but anyway, it's there have just been so many things that have been taken on by the members of this group, and now in its larger form, really the largest commitment being by LinkedIn in Skillful. So you guys should be really proud of your own company.
Yeah, so I got a chance to attend one of those events. As a matter of fact, the very last one before the book came out.
Yeah.
And there were people there from The Gap and from a bunch of big companies. What role do you see companies, in general, what role do you see companies playing? I mean, LinkedIn may be a little bit unique because we're a technology company, so we play a little like different role. But like, what role would you expect someone like The Gap to play?
Well,
Or would you hope someone like The Gap?
Yeah, no, I hope, and there are a number of different kind of retail partners and other companies, but I hope that what companies will do in the context of Skillful is they'll challenge themselves to think about what are the skills that are needed for their employees, and how can they reveal those rather than using the traditional bachelor's degree and 4 years experience, so that people who don't have a bachelor's degree are able to also be possible applicants for those jobs if they have the other skills that are needed. So for example, somebody who's been working for 5 years as an accountant with an AA degree, and who is an extremely dedicated employee, could apply to work in a retail job that would otherwise now require a BA and 2 years experience in retail, but there's no particular correlation between the BA and 2 years experience in retail if you have the numeracy skills that working as an accountant with an AA degree would make you eligible for that job. So it opens up the applicant pool for a qualified applicant and gives them equal dignity in applying for that job. So I would hope that a company would consider the real skills that are required for that and create transparency around that, and then also think about what are the career paths, both the internal training we can do within our company to help people get on career paths, and also the career paths we can make transparent on this collaboration between us on Skillful, and make transparent to be able to be used on LinkedIn as well, and so people can see the career paths, and we have on the site data on the income that you can expect as you move on these career paths, so that others who want to enter into those career paths can begin to see, if I get these skills, what might I expect, in terms of the career I can have and the income I can expect. Or if I have these skills, but I could move over into a different career path. The governor of Colorado always likes to tell these tales about, people who lose their job in one sector and can move into a different sector and the career path they get on. And he's very specific about the data he uses, and it's very inspirational for people.
So how many people here have actually looked at the Skillful product and the Training Finder and so forth? So some of you have. So after this, you all go take a look at it. It's just,
Thank you, Pablo. I'm glad you have.
Yes, exactly. So it's just at skillful.com, and actually LinkedIn.com.
For the first time.
LinkedIn.com/training also gets you there. So one of the things is these paths, which basically tie education, so training, directly to career outcomes, which is a big, powerful component of what the overall design actually is. LinkedIn is a technology platform, and we're trying to enable this at scale through technology. So how do you think about technology platforms? You're founding one, which is going to be working on creating new jobs. But from the perspective of a nonprofit who's trying to bring together a coalition around this, what role does the platform play? And it might be inspirational for people who are listening to this, because we are building platforms all the time. It would be great to be able to build the right stuff to be able to support this kind of effort.
Yeah, I think platforms are the breakthrough technology of the moment. They're the institutions of the moment, in my mind. I really do think that. I think they are the enablers. I was telling Alan this earlier. The CEO of Microsoft was interviewed recently at a conference I was at, and he was asked, what's the technology that Microsoft's developed that you're most excited about? Let's just hear two guesses from the audience on what you think it is.
I've heard this story, so.
What do you think he said? Just a couple guesses from the audience.
HoloLens, right?
Okay, and what's the other one? Somebody else?
Personal assistant?
Okay, here's what he said. He's almost as old as I am, if not as old, so this may tell you something. He said Excel. Okay, now why did he say Excel? He said because it took people who weren't numerate and let them be able to use numbers. Mm-hmm. Okay, so my view of platforms is that they enable people to use data, knowledge, anything, and work with it even if they don't have the capacity. And what I'd love to have us get to is to have these platforms enable people to be able to use the language of skills and manipulate that without any sophisticated or complex understanding of skills. That's where we really want to get. In fact, it's a place where I would really love to see Microsoft help us get, and this alliance with you be a place where they could really help us get. And I told him that after he gave this talk, when we had the pleasure of meeting one-on-one, and he said, so what'd you think of the talk? And I said, well, I actually think that there's something we can make of this. I don't know whether he will be that ambitious, because it's a huge challenge to really figure out how to do that. But if we could use the platform to give people the capacity as easily as an Excel spreadsheet gives people the capacity to use numbers, to use the language of skills, and then all the tools you guys create, all the platforms that you enable could draw on that tool. We really could give people the ability to, it would be an entirely new institution.
And this would be as useful for the individual who's looking for a job, but also for the person who's setting up job description in the first place.
Right.
And also
Right.
for an educational institution who's trying to figure out what actually to teach.
And the truth is, it would be, my pitch to him included, it would also be useful for your business customers for anticipating their products going forward, I mean, I won't get into it all here, but it's useful not just in the employment context, but it's useful in the entire business operation context. Because if you look at how they're running, for example, IT systems for an aircraft engine, the skills that are used for the design and operation and service of that aircraft engine are also going to become smarter in figuring out the design of that aircraft engine in its next iteration. I mean, the whole operations research of the business gets changed. Anyway, we're going in a direction I'm sure that Alan has no interest in taking this conversation, but
interesting
it
because
becomes,
it's one of, sorry, go ahead.
It just becomes an entirely different system, and it's all driven by the platform, which gives you the capacity to use the language of skills.
And it's really interesting for us too, because we have the profile information, we have the search capabilities, we have it divided up by company, we have it associated with people and with their education they've actually come through. So we have a lot of those platform components already in place.
Right.
And I love the idea of applying it to multiple things. We've talked internally here about building great tools for strategic HR planning and so forth, which is a similar type of tool to take advantage of that knowledge once it actually exists within an organization.
Right.
How do you feel about the separate, the sort of, if you will, the sort of for-profit approach to companies? So LinkedIn is a for-profit company versus, say, open source or open standards. What role do those play with each other? And when you're thinking about it from the perspective of building a coalition, how do they fit together?
Yeah, it's really difficult. I really think that the best value of data for everybody is the capacity to share data. And the challenge is how to do that while preserving the proprietary interest in data. And that's, it's the hardest part of the equation in these collaborations, because I really think there's the greatest value to everybody comes when you can aggregate data. And this is something I'm working on now in this commerce context that you talk about, because the government, for example, has a huge amount of data that could be so much more useful to everybody if it was publicly available in a way that was able to be used by everybody. But the investment value for the government to do that is limited. I mean, it's hard to persuade the government to invest in doing that, and to doing that in a way that's useful for people. Take ONET data, which you guys are familiar with. The government's just not going to invest in making that really available in a distinctively useful way. There's a huge amount of data available in the private sector, which, if available to everybody, could be so much more useful to everybody. And as long as it's stovepiped, isn't maximally useful to anybody. And in the insurance industry where I used to work, we actually were very effective at creating ways to pool data and make it more useful to everyone. I mean, insurance underwriting, which sounds really boring, is actually an incredibly interesting science, where you would pool data and you would learn risk. You'd learn about risk. You'd figure out the risk of, of an earthquake, the frequency, the intensity, so that you could determine by, for every home, what you would want to charge for insurance, whatever. It was all done by pooling data, and the competitive advantage of somebody having better data than somebody else because they insured more houses wasn't overwhelmed by the fact that you could have much better data for everybody if you pooled your data. And there are, many other examples of this. I don't think we figured that out very well yet, and need to do a lot more work on it. I think there's too much of an inclination to lock up data by company, and we need to get smarter about that.
It's definitely the knee jerk.
Yeah.
So I want to invite people to come up and ask questions. I've got a couple more to go here, but so please, there's a microphone right here in the center of the room, and those people who are on the feed, I believe, is an easy way to ask questions from there as well. So please do. But before we switch to that, and while people are lining up, working in the insurance industry and then moving yourself into essentially a role working with government, taking over as head of the Markle Foundation, a commitment to service pretty much throughout your entire career. What advice do you give to people who are interested in making that kind of a transition?
My actual first job after being a law clerk for a judge after law school, and I went to Berkeley for law school as well as an undergraduate.
Go Bears.
My first job was in government. I worked, went first in the Justice Department and then in the White House. And then when we were fired by our country, I went into the private sector. So I really encourage people to work in different sectors because it's the only way you can really understand how people think and what the roles are of different sectors. So I think it's really important, and particularly when you're young, I think it's important to get a picture of what the tools are that you can deploy in different sectors to address things, and to understand how people feel and what the missions are in different sectors. So I'd encourage people to do that. I really would.
Fantastic. So, let's start.
Hi, Zoe. Thanks for coming. It's a great talk. I haven't read your book yet. I'm looking forward to it.
Good.
My name is Craig Martel. I head up engineering for the learning experience for LinkedIn Learning. And before that, I had the privilege of owning the skills taxonomy team. So I'm very passionate about skills, and we've shared our skills taxonomy both with ONET, or at least pieces of it, not the whole thing.
Right.
And we've also done it with, say, Singapore and some other people, and we're talking to the EU now. What's your view about how sharing a language of skills can impact the American economy, but internationally?
I'm sorry, can what?
What's your view on how sharing a language of skills internationally can have a positive impact on the domestic economy? Really, I'm asking, should we be selfish and keep this information for ourselves, or should we broadcast it internationally as well?
No, I think it's great. I think there's a lot of learning that we can get and share by sharing that language of skills. I mean, you can probably tell me more than I can tell you on this, but these. In part, the challenge is that we have so much work to do at home just to sort things out ourselves, that if we can learn from work that's already been done elsewhere, where in some places they've been much more intentional about it, we may have more to suck up than we have to contribute, I'm afraid.
Just as a follow-up, Singapore has spent a decade sort of hand tagging skills in the
Exactly.
manufacturing industry, right? Where our skills, at least on LinkedIn, are skewed more towards professionals. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Zoe. Thank you for coming today. My name is Ali. I'm in the Business Leadership Program, Global Sales. So my question for you is about the relationship between technology companies and the government. So you mentioned, I'm an American history major, I was in college. So I appreciate that you drew that comparison between the digital economy and the Industrial Revolution, and how those two, I think, are very similar. I very much agree with you on that. And in the like early part of the 20th century, we had huge companies that were really dominating the economy, and then we had Teddy Roosevelt come in and break all of those companies up. And it seems that we're coming to somewhat of a similar point where we have a few large companies that are really becoming gatekeepers in the digital space. And I'm curious about what your thoughts on that are, and what you think the relationship should be between the government and those companies.
Well, I think I don't think we're at a stage where there are our barriers at the moment, in my mind, are as much will as anything. I think that the movements that we have had have demonstrated such strong public passion for our government needing to have a vision, have a plan, and take action. And that's what we need to listen to. The problems have not been that the companies have stood in the way of government acting, but that we have not managed to break through the barriers of leadership. And I think you would find with the leadership of someone like Teddy Roosevelt, those barriers would be broken down, and that's what I hope will be where we go next. Again, I'm such an optimist, I actually believe we can do it. I mean, one of the things that I find interesting is that a lot of our U.S. companies in the last few years have been negotiating on their own with foreign companies. They shouldn't have to do that. And I think that we have a very strange thing happening where, in part, the U.S. ethic has been, the government should stay out of things, and, we don't want the U.S. government to be making policy. But then when foreign countries step into the void of the U.S. government not making policy, our companies are in the position where they have to step in and negotiate defensively to protect themselves. So, we're either going to cede policy making to foreign countries by our not making policy, or our government's going to have to step up. And I think that's where we are. I think the government's going to have to step up, but I don't think the companies are standing in their way. I think we have to just create a national will where we say there's a strong demand from the public for the government to step up, and this is the moment, and we've got to do it.
Thank you.
I hope that's responsive.
And I entirely agree. I think, just throw in one quick thing. I like the resonances between government and companies and other entities, as you mentioned earlier, sort of playing their part together and sort of being able to work together. Because I think the kind of coalition we've talked about building around Skillful and so forth is actually a model for addressing a whole bunch of different kinds of problems, including this one.
That's a good point.
Hi. Welcome. My name is Tremaine Bess. I am a member of the HR team. I recently joined LinkedIn from the Gap, so I'm glad that you mentioned the Gap.
Great.
This is week 3 for me. I think my question is really about when you look at the unemployment disparity of minorities, and then you look at what you do from a skill building, skill set, and partnering with organizations, is there a diversity and inclusion component as a part of your strategy when you look at your partners?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for raising it. But it's very much a part of it, and we're very much, we started out with advanced manufacturing and IT jobs, and we very much want to make sure that people of color and women can see themselves in those jobs. And if you take a look at the site and see if you see us trying to give people good role models, but we're very much attending to it.
Thank you.
And I would only add that there's I think a major component that we've discovered as we've gone along working on the skillful stuff, and we knew this ahead of time, but the strength of it really matters, is that in order to make it work, we need to have what we've been calling navigators. These are people who basically help individuals to actually choose a job they want, to help them evaluate the education which is in front of them. It could be family members, it could be somebody who works at the high school or the college. There's a lot of people who could play that role. We have found in general that some of our best partners are partners who are nonprofits who focus specifically on communities of color. And they are fantastic partners for us for bringing Latinos or African Americans or women into the system, because they find it so valuable to have this additional set of tools in order to help their constituencies be successful.
Uh-oh.
I have a question. You guys have mentioned companies a bunch of times. I think that the Starbucks and Gap examples were great. So it sounds like companies need to do more to make this skills-based labor market work. So what are the barriers and what do they need to change to come over that?
First of all, Allison has been your great leader on Skillful, and she is really a spectacular leader and a great partner. So. Well, maybe Wanlei, do you want to answer that question? Wanlei Cheng runs this effort for Markle. Why don't you answer that question?
So I think obviously maybe a step back of this is when we first envisioned Skillful, it's all around an employment triangle, right? And so it is about how do we make skills the currency of this ecosystem between job seekers, educators, and employers. We're trying to work it at all angles, right? Part of the most public-facing part of Skillful probably is the job seeker-facing component. It's the platform, it's the tools, it's the coaches. But behind that, all the sausage making, you've got to make sure there are the great jobs and that there are employers who are invested in skills-based hiring and developing their talent. And the big barriers that we've kind of come across, there's nothing that's going to be shocking to folks, I think, but there is first just this is how we do it. Our systems aren't ready for change, and there's a difference between big companies and small companies. One of the great things about working in advanced manufacturing and IT is that in advanced manufacturing, aging workforce, huge need. So people are feeling the need to try anything, right? IT, growing gangbusters. So people, again, are willing to try different ways of hiring and different ways of hiring people out of different training programs. As you get beyond a little bit of kind of the believers or the people who are a little bit desperate, there's more of a convincing case you have to make, whether it's from an ROI perspective, which is really hard to measure, right? As you guys know, of how can we convince folks by opening up your applicant pool to people who don't have the college degree. You now have thousands more applicants that you're trying to screen. And small companies, we don't have the capacity. So then they're asking, well, what's the assessment you're going to give us that is going to be the replacement for that proxy of a college degree? So you get into hear ya, but how do I make this actually practically work? As one just sort of operational, I think, barrier. And then I think there is sort of this change management kind of culture barrier, which is much harder and much of a softer thing that I think the reason why we went this at a location-based way is there is this community building that needs to happen. It is trying to build a set of folks who then can peer pressure each other. So I would say like those at least top of mind are the couple of things. And the ways we're trying to work to go beyond that barrier with LinkedIn is, can we build some case studies? Can we build some exemplar employers that can help influence others? And can we get better data around this? I think there's always, multiple ways of influencing. So there's the logic, that'll work with some people. There's the peer pressure, that'll work with some people. And then there's like, hey, you're feeling like you're part of a movement and you're part of the cool crowd. Can we create a little bit of that component in Colorado and Phoenix?
Yeah, it really is a testament to the amount of hands-on effort it takes to get something like this actually up and running. Because it is really challenging to get those first participants, but once you get the first set of participants, you can really make traction. I think we have time maybe for one more question.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Stephanie, and I work on the Education Partnerships team. I had a question, I guess piggybacking off of Allison's question. What role do you see higher education institutions playing in this revolution of making the workforce more skills-oriented?
I think they've got a really big role to play at every level, and the ones who will come along first, I think, will be some of the really innovative universities and community colleges and the boot camps and some of those. But I think everybody's going to come along eventually. I think they're going to find that it's not just about getting a job, but it really is about being much more concrete about what people are getting out of the courses that they're taking. They'll start by changing the language. They'll start by revealing what they think they're training to in the courses. And Alan and I did this little road show for your educators in New York and your education partners in New York, and we had a great conversation. It was really a good conversation. Allison was there. A lot of the fields that train people for licenses already really do a lot of this. You know, if you're giving somebody an AA degree in a field that has a license, or a bachelor's degree in a field that has a license, like in healthcare or accounting or something, the requirements are so specific. You already know what skills you're training them to. You just don't think of it that way. Mm-hmm. So I think we'll be peeling back that onion with people in a constructive way, I think. I mean, there's a lot of resistance at first, particularly, you know, at the education level, if they think what we're talking about is, you know, is this just all about trade schools? But thinking skills and teamwork skills and critical thinking and just a huge amount of the you know, numeracy and the things that are valued classically in an educational environment, writing and you know, all these skills are the kinds of skills we're talking about. This is not a clash of values. It's a transparency and a granularity that technology enables us to do that students are entitled to, and that's really where we're going.
Fantastic. So Pablo, do you want to send us off? I believe we're out of time.
Please join me in thanking Zoe and Alan for amazing insight.